Armin Schmiede. Base jumping. Okay, quick side note for you. Would you ever go skydiving, or does that already sound terrifying? Because base jumping has a fatality and injury rate about 43 times higher than regular skydiving, mostly because you jump from much lower altitudes. That didn't stop the people in this video, though. August 26, 2016. The Bernese Oberland, Swiss Alps. A 28-year-old Italian wingsuit pilot named Armin Schmiede hikes to a high takeoff point above the town of Kandersteg, sets up his phone, and opens Facebook Live. He points the camera at the mountains, at the cliff face, at himself, zipped into a brightly colored wingsuit. He's smiling, completely relaxed, and he looks straight into the lens and says, "Today, you fly with me." Then he puts the phone, with the live stream still running, into his pocket. Kandersteg had a reputation. The wingsuit base community knew it. 2016 was already being called one of the deadliest years the sport had ever seen, with experts openly using the word epidemic. None of that appeared to register as a warning to Armin. For about 20 to 25 seconds, viewers heard wind, the rush of the suit, the sound of someone flying. Armin had done this before. He knew what he was doing. And then there was a loud sound, something that didn't fit the rhythm of a clean flight. And then nothing, just ambient mountain noise, and a comment section filling with panic from people watching a live stream with no way to do anything about it. Search teams found his body near the jump zone. He had crashed into terrain, either before or during parachute deployment. The exact sequence was never fully confirmed publicly. The stream kept running after the impact. It archived, and then it stayed up, for a while, for anyone to find. International coverage landed hard on the phrase, "broadcast his own death." Debate flared about whether platforms like Facebook should have any responsibility for live streaming stunts in places notorious for killing people. Well, the answer largely was, platforms did nothing. Armin was 28 years old. He said goodbye to his followers in 4 words, and the camera caught everything except the part where it ended. "Today, you fly with me." Ian Flanders. There is a version of irony that stops being funny the second it becomes real. Ian Flanders, 37, from Southern California, was a base jumper, a wingsuit pilot, and a camera operator who worked on extreme sports films. In July 2015, he was in eastern Turkey, the Munzer Gorge near Erzincan, a narrow ravine of sheer walls and turbulent summer air, participating in Turkey's very first major organized base event. He was also, at the time, working on a documentary about deaths in base jumping. Ian had already completed one successful jump that day. Between jumps, a TV crew caught him on camera, enthusiastic, praising the gorge. "Amazing," he told them. "The cliffs, the scenery, the potential of the place." Multiple jumpers were going off one after another for the live broadcast. The event was designed as a showcase, proof that wingsuit base could be spectacular, controlled, and worth putting on television. On his second jump, Ian exited in his wingsuit. When he pulled his parachute, the lines wrapped around his legs. It's a known malfunction, rare but known, and survivable if there's enough altitude to correct it. In a narrow gorge with sheer walls closing in on both sides, there wasn't. In full view of the TV cameras, he spun out of control and struck the cliff face. Boats and rescue teams in the gorge moved immediately. But with the height of the fall and the visible impact, there was nothing to rescue. It was a recovery from the start. His body was pulled from the water. Turkish authorities opened an investigation. Outside Magazine and other outlets ran pieces pointing to the exact thing you're already thinking. Ian Flanders died making a documentary about base jumping fatalities. He became the subject he had been studying. The footage of his final jump, lines tangling, body spinning toward rock, was captured by the same cameras that were supposed to document the sport's beauty. Amber Bellows. February 8th, 2014. Zion National Park, Utah, USA. Base jumping is explicitly illegal in Zion. The Park Service bans it because of the rescue risk, the wilderness regulations, the sheer cost and danger of getting emergency teams into the remote terrain when something goes wrong. Amber Bellows, 28, from Utah, knew this. She and her husband, fellow jumper Clayton Butler, hiked up to the Mount Kenesava area anyway. 2 weeks earlier, they had gotten married. Amber jumped first. Her parachute did not open properly. She fell roughly 2,000 feet down steep, remote terrain into the canyon below. Clayton followed with his own jump, landed safely, and tried to reach her. The cliffs were impassable. He searched, and hours passed. He couldn't find her, couldn't get to her, couldn't call anyone. They were deep in the backcountry with no signal. At around 6:30 in the evening, after hours of searching alone, Clayton gave up and hiked out to find a phone. Park rangers launched a search that night, working to triangulate where a body might have come to rest on a sheer cliff face in the dark. The next morning, a helicopter spotted Amber. Rangers were short-hauled down to her position on the rock face and hoisted her to a waiting ambulance. She was already gone. The recovery operation alone required specialized equipment and significant risk to the rescue teams, exactly what the park's ban on base jumping was designed to prevent. Acting Superintendent Jim Milestone called it really sad, and in the same breath used it to explain, again, why base jumping is not allowed in the park. Within weeks, another prominent base jumper and climber died in a separate incident at Zion. The park became a flashpoint. 2 deaths in one season, both illegal, both requiring massive rescue operations at taxpayer expense. The case has been cited ever since in arguments about whether banning base jumping in national parks actually makes things more dangerous, pushing jumpers to go in secret without telling anyone, so that when something goes wrong, nobody knows where to look. Amber Bellows was 28, 2 weeks into her marriage, on a mountain she wasn't supposed to be on, and Clayton had to hike out and tell someone he'd lost her. Carlos Suárez. April 1st, 2025, near Madrid, Spain. A hot air balloon drifts over open countryside with 5 stunt jumpers on board. Cameras are rolling. This is a film production. The documentary is called La Fiera, which translates as The Wild Beast, and it is specifically about the life of the man about to jump. Carlos Suárez, 52, legendary Spanish climber, base jumper, and wingsuit pilot. A man who had outlived most of his peers in the sport. Carlos had watched his close friends die one by one. Dario Barrio, Alvaro Buto, Manolo Chana, all Spanish base pioneers, all gone. La Fiera was meant to be a tribute to them and to Carlos's own improbable survival through decades of free solo ascents and high-risk jumps. He was, in a way, proof that you could do this long enough to grow old in it. The documentary was his story. He was helping to tell it. When his turn came, he exited the balloon. His canopy did not open. The other 4 jumpers landed safely. Carlos did not. He hit the ground with no open parachute above him, the most unambiguous kind of outcome this sport has. Some secondary reports suggest the reserve also failed to deploy correctly, and that crew only realized he was missing when they started clearing the landing zone. The Guardia Civil and emergency services from Via Cañas arrived at the scene. The production companies behind the film, A3 Media Cine and Mode Producciones, released statements saying the jumps had taken place under strict safety measures. They gave no technical details about what had gone wrong. The Guardia Civil opened a formal investigation to determine the exact failure, whether it was a pilot chute issue, a bag lock, line twists, a deployment timing problem, or something in the equipment sequence that simply didn't trigger. As of the reporting available, no official conclusion has been made public. Brendan Weinstein. January 5th, 2026. Table Mountain, Cape Town, South Africa. One of the most recognizable natural landmarks on Earth, a flat-topped mountain rising roughly 3,500 feet above the city, accessible by cable car, visited by millions of tourists every year. Base jumping there is illegal. The national park explicitly prohibits it. Local experts describe a wingsuit jump off Table Mountain as very technical, which in base community language is not a compliment. It's a warning. Brendan Weinstein, an American wingsuit pilot in his mid-30s, had his footage featured by GoPro and Red Bull. He had tens of thousands of followers. He was also an active campaigner against the criminalization of base jumping, publicly arguing that the sport could be done safely and that banning it only pushed jumpers toward more risk. He flew from the US to South Africa specifically to attempt this jump, on a mountain where it was illegal, to prove, apparently, that it could be done. Early that morning, he launched into Platteklip Gorge. Witnesses hiking nearby described hearing a sound like a jet engine, the roar of a wingsuit at speed, followed by a violent impact. One hiker posted afterward that seconds later they saw a wingsuiter, a parachute, and debris tumbling through a trail they had been walking on. If we had walked 10 seconds earlier, they wrote, we likely would have been killed as well. Brendan failed to appear at the planned landing zone. A large search and rescue operation launched, involving multiple ground teams and aerial support. His body was found mid-morning and winched off the mountain by helicopter. He had reportedly plunged around 1,000 feet into the gorge before striking terrain. South African Police Service opened an inquest. Former skydiver Jeff Aliff called it a very technical jump with very sad consequences and reinforced the argument for keeping it illegal, the exact opposite of what Brendan had been advocating. The online debate split immediately. Those who mourned him and supported legal, regulated jumping, and those pointing out that an unannounced illegal stunt on a crowded tourist mountain had nearly killed hikers who never signed up for any of this. Brendan believed the ban was the problem. The inquest investigators, the rescue teams, and the hiker who was 10 seconds from being hit by falling debris tended to disagree. The Grand Canyon Jumper. Late July 2024. The South Rim of Grand Canyon National Park, Arizona, USA. One of the most visited places in the world, 6 million tourists a year. Gift shops, shuttle buses, observation decks with safety railings, rangers on patrol. Base jumping there is illegal, has been for decades. The National Park Service is very clear about this. And yet, a man, his name withheld pending identification and next of kin notification, walked to a rim overlook with a parachute rig. He stepped off the edge. Something went catastrophically wrong. He fell to the canyon floor. The Grand Canyon, at the South Rim, drops roughly 4,000 feet to the Colorado River. It is not a forgiving place to attempt an unplanned landing. Park visitors reported the fall, and rangers launched an emergency response. Getting anyone down to him was slow. The walls are vertical. The terrain is loose rock baking under extreme summer heat. By the time rangers reached him, there was nothing to do except confirm he was dead and begin the process of recovering his body and preserving the scene for investigators. The National Park Service and the Coconino County Medical Examiner opened a joint investigation. Officials noted that base jumping adds a high-risk layer to an already dangerous environment. That quote could have been written in 1990 and would have been equally accurate. What makes this case sit differently from the others is what we don't know. We don't know his name. We don't know if he was experienced or not. We don't know if he had a GoPro, a following, a sponsorship deal, or just a parachute and an idea. He isn't a celebrated athlete or a documented personality. He is just a man who jumped off the Grand Canyon and didn't come back up,